Sorry, my battery died earlier, but I had I was in the break room when the custodian broke the fluorescent tube, and I grabbed my computer and ran, and I called my colleague to say, "Hey, would you please let the students know?" I wasn't sure how to email the whole class that there's been an emergency. I didn't really elaborate more because a lot of these issues, the more you elaborate, the more questions people ask, and before you know it, you're spilling your entire life story, right? Oh, where else is mercury found? You know, what happens when you inhale mercury? And before you know it, you have to tell your whole life biography. What is autism? You know, how does mercury? I don't want to deal with that. There's an emergency, right? And he emailed the students, and it would have been great, except that I left a disaster in the break room. And you know what? I don't know why people need to make such a big fuss when you forget to clean up the break room. It happens. People have stuff happen all the time. Maybe you get a phone call that there's been a house, there's been an emergency at your house, right? Water pipe burst, your house is on fire. Are you really going to clean up the break room before you tend to that? Maybe you get a phone call that a family member has passed away, right? If I see a mess in the break room, and by the way, I have food allergies. The last thing I want to do is to clean up a mess in the break room. I'd rather put on some gloves and clean it up and just forget it ever existed. You know, I need to get some exercise anyway. I need to take a break from preparing my course materials, in between classes anyway, right? But anyway, next thing I know, HR was very upset at me. And the HR girl was a little bit younger than me. And when she asked me what happened, and when I explained to her, and I went a little bit too, I should have just said there's been an emergency with her as well. But when I explained about the mercury and the autism, she thought I had three heads. And she thought I was making excuses and all that. And I've learned in the future to put things in writing. So if that situation were to happen again today, what I'd probably do is call the colleague, right? Because the students definitely don't need a surprise. Okay, that part was okay. But then go to my computer and write down to my colleague, thank you for alerting the students. There's been a serious emergency. I realize there's a mess in the break room. I would appreciate if you could take care of that. If not, I'll come back tomorrow. And so that way it won't look like I'm trying to neglect things, right? I should have done it that way. I trusted people. I really hate putting things in writing, by the way. Not because I hate writing or that I'm anxious about. No, I just hate the fact that I can't trust people more than anything else, right? It's kind of like, you may remember a few years ago, I had a couple of roommates, and my toilet paper kept disappearing, my kitchen utensils kept disappearing, and my roommate said that, hey, why don't you just hide those things in your room? Yeah, I could do that. But I, I think I signed a lease for a house, not a jail, right? That was the upsetting part of it. But anyways, I predicted the mercury incident in my dream. I predicted my ex-girlfriend getting married, actually, even though we hadn't spoken to each other for years at that point. What had happened was, back in 2016, I broke up with a girl because I was so busy competing in the Computer Olympiad, and she thought I was cheating on her. And I kind of was, but with a computer game, not with another person. And fast forward 8 years later, 2024 now, I dreamt that she had gotten married, and I was still jealous of it. I'm not, but in the dream, I was still jealous about that. And for revenge, I gave her a piece of art made of some really radioactive material for her to hang on her wall. And so I was watching them die, and so I was looking at their Facebook. Why am I so tired? My husband's going for chemotherapy tomorrow, and they had no idea what was killing them. And I was just watching all of this unfold from my computer, and that was really fun. And then I woke up, and not long after, she actually did get married, and also I gave her a gift because not long after they had gotten married, one day I was making crystals out of a radioactive material, a few quintillion times weaker than the stuff in my room, but a radioactive material. When one of the crystals I made looked exactly like what I had given her in the dream, so I had to give it to her, and so that was good. And instead of killing them, it might actually save their lives, because even though it's radioactive, it actually blocks more radiation than it gives off, right? I actually tried this one time using a Geiger counter to see how radioactive bismuth is, and you actually get a weaker signal if you put your Geiger counter right next to a big block of bismuth, for obvious reasons, right? But so I dreamt about my ex-girlfriend getting married. I dreamt about what else? Oh, I gotta be careful. 3 years ago, I had gone about 40 days without masturbating. I'm a Facebook friend of Polish Idol second place winner Evelina Polenta. She was on Polish Idol season 1. One night, I had dreamt that I had visited her, and because it had, in the dream, it had been years and years since I quit masturbating, and as a result, I got her pregnant with 10 babies at one time. But surprisingly, I wasn't too upset about that, and our families were all excited about that. But she was huge, and I thought that looked very attractive when she was huge like that. And then I woke up, and I realized that I had made a mess in my bed, obviously. Not long after the dream, one day I was talking to her, and I dropped the L-bomb on her, and it went really well. And then I got really nervous if that was the beginning of my dream playing out. And we've been talking about visiting at some point, maybe this winter, and because I also want to visit somebody else there, and so that got me really nervous. So I got to be very, very careful if I do see her. But you know what? Maybe it's meant to be. You know, if I dreamt it and then it happens, maybe it's meant to be, and we'll figure out a way too, right? Not all of life's goals have been planned for me, and they all turn out very well, right? I certainly didn't plan to pivot into making art, you know, as part of my career, right? This is the Peter Like Show. Bum 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 bum. The Peter Like Show. Bum 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 bum.